Hi, welcome to episode 414 of the Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy Kira on Twitter and Instagram. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, which is where this episode and every episode show notes will be. And I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea, where I sell my handspun yarns and knitting patterns. Hi! Welcome. For those of you who this is your first time, I hope you will find a reason to come back. And for those of you who are returning viewers, thanks for joining me again today. It is Sunday afternoon, March 12th. I am coming to you from just outside of Kansas City, and it is a beautiful day here. It's still a little bit chilly, but it is March. It's the high 40s, maybe we might hit 50 today, but it is sunshiny and beautiful. And actually, as soon as I am done podcasting, I think I'm going to go out for a little bit of a walk jog to enjoy the outside. So I hope that you are doing well and have had a good week. I started my job this week and it was exciting and a lot of information, and the first week is done. So I am enjoying it. It's just kind of a new situation, and so I'm getting used to it. And I am going from the past 5 years, I have worked kind of 2/3 to 3/4 time. And I'm going back to working full time. So that is a bit of an adjustment. But I do have knitting to show you for this week. I did not do as much as I hoped because I was awfully tired in the evenings. But my hope is that I'll get back to kind of my normal levels of productivity as we move forward. And I get a little bit more used to the material and also to working. So like I said, I hope that you're doing well. I hope you've had a wonderful week, and let's get right down to it. So today I am drinking organic coconut tea. I am drinking it in my my favorite Kansas mug. Here in Kansas we have lots and lots and lots of Wizard of Oz jokes. And so this is one. It is Toto, and on the mug it says, "Dear Dorothy, hate Oz, took the shoes, find your own way home." So like I said, we have lots and lots and lots of Toto jokes. And this is organic coconut black tea. It has coconut and almonds, and it is from Tea Time Scottsdale, which is a lovely tea shop in Arizona. I have been before, but I also order from them online, and it is just absolutely delicious. So I'm going to have a little bit of that to kind of perk me up and get me going for my afternoon exercise. So, like I said, I did not make quite as much progress this week as I had hoped, but I did make some progress. I have a good start on a new work in progress. And then I picked up an old work in progress and worked on that some, and I have some things to kind of occupy me for the week ahead. So let's talk about things. The first one let's talk about the one that I showed you last week that I was just casting on, and that is Linen True by Uta Narwatil. And I'm probably butchering all of that, but it is a lovely wrap meant to be used with color changing yarns, either short color changes or I'm working on it in more of a longer gradient. And it has all these cool triangle patterns, so some of it is put together modularly and some of it is knit in stripes. And so I have finished the first 2 sections of the shawl, and this is what I have so far. So last week I believe I had the first triangle done. I did the 2 other triangles, and then I did the stripey section, and I am right at the point where I am getting ready to start. We'll have another row of triangles across, and this one has a lot of triangles. I believe it's either 12 or 13, I can't remember. And this is a paid for pattern on Ravelry. And so I am working on it, but I'm really, really pleased with how it's starting out. It looks really good. Like I said, you knit these triangles kind of modularly. I knit the first one on its own, and then for the second one, I picked up on one side, and the third one I picked up on one side. And now from now on, I will be working, sort of the same way, but I'll be picking up stitches from the needle from the stripes to attach them to the stripes. So that's kind of where I'm going with this project. Let's talk about the yarns that I am using. I am using 2 yarns from Zen Yarn Garden. This is a sample for them. And what I am using is their new Superfine Glitter. And I am using one skein, which I think this is probably about 400 yards, but I'm not exactly sure because this one didn't come with a tag. Ooh, and I'm just making a mess out of the ball. But this is their Superfine Glitter base, which it's hard to see the glitter on the white, but this is the natural color, so it's just undyed. And then the contrast color that I'm using is I am using a Superfine Glitter Luxe cake, a Superfine Glitter cake. And that is this card right here. Their Superfine Glitter is a blend of 90% Superfine Merino and then a 10% blend of Stellina. And this is in the colorway Inferno, and it's kind of missing the center of the cake because I'm working through it. But it basically was a full gradient, so it went back through. I went through the black and kind of the red of this into the orange, and as you can see, I've got a little bit more red in here, and I had some black in there as well. So, and these cakes are 680 yards, 620 meters, and the name is Inferno. So that is the yarn that I'm working from, and on this one, you can definitely see the Stellina in there because I can see it on the camera. So that is what I'm working with, and I'm just going to keep working on this pattern. I would say I'm not very far in. The first part doesn't take a ton of time, so hopefully this will only take me another couple weeks. I am knitting it as written on size 4 needles. There are quite a lot of ends to weave in, and at this point almost all my ends, you'll see there are ends for each triangle and whatnot. At this point I've basically woven in my ends and snipped them kind of short so they don't get in my way, but I have left them because I always like to do that before I block, just in case things pull and shift while blocking. And the deal is that I'm going to be able to block these triangles to lay more or less flat as I spread them out, so I expect there will be some shifting in the ends that I've woven in, so that's why I've left them that way. That's a good general rule. That's what I do with most of my knits, but I specifically am doing that for this because of that. Yeah, so that's where I am, and I think it looks really cool. I wasn't sure whether I was gonna, so in the original they use a faster color changing yarn. I think they used like Mille Baby Fiori or something like that, and so I wasn't sure how the longer changes were gonna go, whether it was just gonna look weird, but so far I really like it. So there will be photos of this on my Instagram soon. But that is what I am working on, and I'm really enjoying that. It's kind of fun, and especially with the triangles the way they are, you can kind of whip out one in an hour or two. I think they take me about 2 hours, but it's kind of like a discrete. I like things where I can say, oh yes, I did that much tonight. So yeah, so that's where I'm at with that one. So while I was thinking about what else to pick up, I sort of cleaned up my work area on the couch. We have this really like huge sectional couch that kind of, it's a big L shape in the room. And so next to me on the couch, I have like a big work spot where I keep a whole bunch of things that I'm working on, and I keep a little tray with like a bed and breakfast tray, a little tray that has like all my notions and all kinds of things on it. And so when I got home, it was kind of a mess, and I was kind of cleaning out, and I wanted to remove bags from projects that were done and whatever. And I found a bunch of things that I had been working on before I left, and you know, out of sight, out of mind. They weren't whips that I intentionally abandoned. I may have put them down specifically to work on something else, but I decided to start picking them back up and working on them. So one of the things that I had been working on for class in December and January was the Zan Zip tee, and that is a pattern by Suzanne Nielsen, and I think I have a picture of it here. It is as I said, a tee. Yep, this is the Zan Zip tee. You can see right there. And it is a pattern that makes use of some of Zen Yarn Garden's mini skeins or really cool pooling yarns, and then, or their variegates, and then a neutral color to kind of give you a tee that's shaped in a bunch of different dimensions. Excuse me. And the pattern is, it is a pattern, but it's also a little bit of a recipe in the sense that you take your measurements at the beginning, not a ton of measurements, but you take your measurements at the beginning and then you customize how exactly you knit the tee to fit your needs. So for instance, you take your bust measurement, you take your hip measurement, you take the length from the hip to the waist, you take the circumference around your arm at the shoulder joint, and that helps you plan sort of how the tee is constructed sideways. And so it helps you adjust how wide you want to knit your tee. It helps you add some short row shaping so that you can, for instance, if your waist is smaller than your hips, you can kind of flare it to your hips. And how long you want your tee, where you specifically want your tee to hit, and how much of an opening you want to leave at the shoulders, excuse me, so that the sleeves fit you appropriately. So it's a really thoughtful pattern with a lot of details taken into account. I knit mine as part of a knit along for Zen Yarn Garden that I was helping teach. But you can order the pattern. The pattern is available on Ravelry. There are kits available on zenyarngarden.com, or you can use yarn that you have in your stash. So I ended up using a trio of their, let me think about this, a trio of the mini skeins, and these are like the baby skeins, which are only 100 yards a piece. And so I ended up using 3 of those in a color coordinated pack. And I do not remember what the names were, but one of the colors is this kind of orangey red here. One of the colors is this kind of variegated on the front, orange and purple and green, and it reminds me a lot of Halloween. And then the color on the back is basically the same color, but in a speckle, so it's just dyed on white. And so I am getting really, really close to the end. If you remember where we were when we left off, if you've been watching this podcast for a while, so the top is constructed sort of sideways, and you sort of work your way around. You start at the center of the back and you work your way around to the center of the front, and then you go back to the back where you had your stitches on a provisional cast on, and you pick them back up and you work all the way around to the front, and then you bind your 2 fronts together using a technique that they call the Zan Zip. Which was sort of developed by Suzanne Nielsen, who is the pattern designer. So as you remember, what I had done is I had started working at the back and I went all the way around to the front, and then I did the other half. And then when I went to go ahead and join my 2 fronts, I did not have the same number of stitches on each side, which was frankly quite a bummer. And we weren't talking I was off by 1, we were talking I was off by 4 or 5 stitches, and it was too much to cover up, and I didn't realize it until, I probably realized it about 2/3 of the way through, when I was like, that really looks like I have more stitches on one needle than the other, but I was like, trust the process, keep going. No, I really did have more stitches on one side than the other. So what I ended up doing was I ended up ripping back to, I'm trying to remember which side it was, I ended up ripping back to the side seam here and then re-knitting the black part and part of the front part. What had happened was I had not been counting correctly when I had cast on for, there are lots of techniques that I don't want to reveal everything in the pattern, but what had happened was at a section where I needed to cast on a bunch of stitches, I did not cast on the right number of stitches, and then I went through all my decreases, and so I did not end up with the same number as the other side. So I went back and figured out what all my mistakes were so that I could redo it, and honestly, when I left on vacation, I think I had sort of finished knitting part of this black section, and then I had to finish the rest of the black section and then do the rest, the other half of the front, so that I could get to the middle where I zip them up. And as you can see, it's a little bit of a raised line, but not too, it's not really that noticeable, so it just makes for sort of an interesting detail. So that was what I finished 2 nights ago. You know, I was just kind of having this, oh, what should I do? And then I was like, I should pick up one of the whips on the couch. So it literally took me 1 night to finish the section of the black and then the final section of the sweater and do the zip. And this time I had the right number of stitches Excellent. And I was mostly done. So the final steps of the pattern have you working on the sleeves, and you are creating a little bit of a sleeve cap, and then you are going ahead and knitting kind of the final border on. And the interesting thing about the border around the sleeve is that it kind of echoes the border at the bottom of the tee. It's a little bit on the bias, so it won't roll so much, and it just gives it a bit of visual interest. So this is what I worked on last night. I was not without mistakes, which are totally user error. I did not read the pattern as carefully as I should. And so I have finished the first sleeve, and now I am picked up for the second sleeve, and I believe this is something I can probably complete at knit night tonight. So I will do so, and then I will have a finished sweater and block it, and I will bring it to show you next week as a finished sweater. So I really don't think I have more than one night's work ahead of me, and I would really, really, really like to do it. I will also say I wove in all of my ends so far on this one. There are lots of ends because there are lots of different sections, and you can still see them hanging out because, again, I did not clip them super close. Kind of everywhere I left an inch or two so that they wouldn't get in my way, but so that they would have enough so that if I stretch during binding and it pulls them at all, I don't have ends popping out places and have to go back and try and fix that. So, like I said, I will finish. This is kind of a V-neck, a little bit of a V-neck front, and then it will be a nice tee that should hit kind of top to middle of my waist, or maybe very top of my hip, based on the length that I planned for it. And I will say that I used 1 3-pack of the minis, and then I used 1 and a bit of the neutral, which is just a skein of their Superfine fingering. I should say this is all fingering weight, and 1 and a bit of the Superfine fingering skein in the black. So I think I'm going to end up using about 1 1/4 skeins, or about 500 yards for the main color, and then the 300 yards of the kind of in between. So that is, I'm very pleased to have this back on the needles and to be working forward at a pace to get it done. Again, it was one of those things that got put aside because I had other samples to work on and other things to do, but I would like to wear the finished object, particularly in the spring and summer, as I really, really like knit tees. Even in wool, they are pretty good. They are moisture wicking, and they do keep you fairly cool, even because they are fingering weight. Like, I wouldn't necessarily knit a heavier weight tee, but generally I can get away with wearing a fingering weight tee even in the heat of the summer. And also because it is so hot and humid here, everywhere is usually air conditioned, so wearing a wool tee is really not an issue. And I have figured out that they actually fit very well into my wardrobe because I can always layer something else on. But like with a bulky sweater, you know, you have a bulky sweater on, and it's not that I don't need those, I do in winter, but tees kind of fit into my wardrobe year round because I can always put something over them, but when it's warm out, I can enjoy them. So that is something that I hope I will have to show you that is finished next week. So let's talk about 2 new potential cast-ons. I will probably only cast on one of these, and I'm not sure which one I will cast on first. So last week I showed you my orange socks that I finished on vacation, and I talked about the fact that I want to knit a rainbow of socks this year, which means it's time for yellow. And I think I mentioned last week that I had placed an order. I had tossed my stash. I didn't have any yellow in a DK to worsted weight, and so I decided to go ahead and buy something, and I bought a skein of Dream in Color Classy, which is really one of my favorite yarns. It is a little bit on the expensive side. I mean, in terms of it is hand dyed, and so it's not inexpensive if you're looking at knitting charity projects or those kinds of things. However, it's just a really great, I feel like it's a really great workhorse yarn, even though it's not quite at workhorse prices. It is a superwash merino that is kettle dyed, so it has enough color and variation to have some interest. I'm such a snob. I'm sorry. There are a lot of commercial dyed yarns that are great out there, and I really, really like them, but I find that after working with kettle dyed and hand dyed yarns for years, I find that sometimes the commercial yarns look a little bit flat. You know the ones I'm talking about, in like a solid color where there's kind of no variation. I really like a slightly semi-solid color so that it gives me just a little bit of variation and texture in the finished object. And one of the things that I really like about Dream in Color, well, there are two things I like about Dream in Color Classy. The first is the yardage. Many worsted weight yarns come 200 yards to the skein, and Dream in Color Classy comes 250 yards to the skein. I do realize that this means it ends up at a slightly lighter worsted weight, or maybe the difference is that it's 113 gram skein as a, or a, yeah, 113 gram skein as opposed to 100 grams, which some of the others may be. That division is often a question of whether they're using kind of 4 ounces on the imperial system or whether they're using the metric system. The other thing that I love about it is that it is machine washable. There are lots of reasons not to use superwash fibers, and I do enjoy using non-superwash fibers for a lot of my own knits. However, I am practical in the sense that I understand that not everyone knows or has time to take care of specialty yarns in the way that they need to be taken care of, i.e. so you don't felt them. And I find the thing that I use Dream in Color Classy the most for is knits for kids, because my sister can throw them in the washing machine and it doesn't matter. So one of the things that I decided is, I know some of the previous pairs of socks have not been superwash, and that's fine, but I decided that if I was going to be buying additional yarn for this project and not just using up things that I had in my stash, that I was going to err towards being washable. So that's a long way to say I ordered a skein of Dream in Color Classy, and I cannot remember which oh, this is Sundance. So this is not their, they had a goldenrod, they had like a whole bunch of different things, and this one was yellow with little blips of darker yellow in it. So I guess this isn't so much a semi-solid as it's a bit of a speckled, but it definitely is a tonal yarn, and I'm excited to get that started. So I will be casting on for a yellow pair of socks soon, and that will be my third in the rainbow. I haven't decided whether I'm going to do a Roy G. Biv or whether I'm just going to do 6. It probably depends what kinds of yarns I come upon. And I have not bought any yarns in advance. I'm kind of just looking at my stash to see if I have anything, and then if not, I'll buy the next color. So when I finish the yellow, I will look to see if I have any greens, and if not, I'll buy a green. And I don't know whether I'll keep it up with Dream in Color Classy or precisely what I'll use. Yeah, so there's my yellow. And my goal is to basically get these done in time for October, which is when they start collecting donations again for the cold winter months. Again, I'm knitting these for Knit the Rainbow. If you go to knittherainbow.com, you will be able to, I think that's their website, knittherainbow.com. They are a 501c3 charity dedicating to providing warm clothing and support to LGBTQIA persons facing houselessness. So that is, I have knit for them before. Often I knit hats and scarves, and this year they mentioned that one of the things they always need is warm socks for the cooler months, because people tend to wear those until they fall apart, and they don't necessarily tend to donate those to shelters or other places that may be distributing clothing. So I can knit socks. I can knit DK weight or worsted weight squishy socks that will keep feet quite warm in the winter, and so that is my project for this year. And selfishly for myself, I want to take a picture of all the rainbow socks in a row. And also I will say that Knit the Rainbow is not currently collecting donations. They collect donations during the like fall months and winter months to distribute, but they actually have closed donations for now. So I'm just keeping all the rainbow socks, and I'll take pictures as I go, and then come October I will put them in a box and send them off. So that is the next stock. The other thing that I found on the couch while I was looking, and yes, this is really bad of me. I don't know what it is. It's like I finished a bunch of stuff. I went on vacation. I came home. I forgot everything, and then was surprised to find all of those things on the couch next to me. But of course they were on the couch next to me because they were works in progress and things that I had put down. So the other thing that I found is, remember this? This is my Christmas sock. Well, I should say this is my Christmas Eve cast-on sock, and I knit the first sock the week of Christmas, and I think I finished it shortly after New Year's, and this was some hand-spun yarn, some fiber that I spun from Hello Yarn, and I believe it was in the colorway Not Crying, so it had nothing to do with Christmas, but I saw it with the reds, greens, and golds and thought it would make a great Christmas sock, and I finished the first one and then didn't do anything else. So I have the second ball of yarn right here ready to go, and I haven't decided. I think I might finish the whip and then knit these and then knit these, but I haven't decided yet. I'm trying to decide between new things that I want to get done and need to get done, and then finishing up some whips before I cast on anything else for myself. So these are the two next sock projects, and I will tell you, I could use a sock project, because that triangle project, I tried to knit that at knit night last week, and it was a little bit too much for my brain to keep up a conversation and to keep counting the way I needed to. Now, of course, last week's knit night was a little bit heavy. We had a lot of conversation going on, and it's not usually quite that engaging. I shouldn't say engaging. It's not usually quite that engrossing. However, I have decided that I need a roundy project for, you know, meetings and when I'm at my computer, and so a sock is a perfect kind of project for that. So one of those will get cast on this week, and I will hopefully have progress to show you next week on those, and I don't know what order they'll be in, but that's what I'm going to work on for now. I also, it's really interesting, I talked about the fact that I needed to think about the kids' sweaters last week, and that I had browsed patterns and that I hadn't seen anything and that I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then like 2 days later, I kind of figured it out. So that's, I suppose that's kind of how it works. A couple days later, I saw that a designer that I really like is releasing a sweater pattern that I knit for myself as a child's version. And I was like, perfect, Roxy will love that. So that is going to be Roxy's sweater. I just have to wait a few months for her to debut that pattern, and so then I just needed to look through and find something for Miles, and I picked actually two possibilities that I am thinking about. So at some point in the not too distant future, I'm probably going to order yarn for at least Miles' sweater and get started on that, and then hope that the pattern for the sweater I'd like to knit for Roxy will be forthcoming. But I wanted to say it was really funny because I talked about that last week and was like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do, and then literally like 2 days later I had decided, and it's still like, just to be clear, it's March 12th today, and their birthdays are both the last 2 weeks in October. So it's not like I'm not starting early. But I just thought that was funny. So, quick sip of tea. I will show you what's new on the spinning front, and then I will let you go. So I did, in fact, get back to spinning for the shop this week. I started spinning a braid of fiber from the sadly no longer in business LL Yarn Co. It's called Chromatic Aberration, and it is on Superwash Merino. And I have the first bobbin done, and I have just a tiny little bit of fiber left for the second bobbin that I need to spin singles for, and then I can go ahead and ply them. And that actually might happen tonight. I can't decide. I will definitely spin the last little bit of singles. I just can't decide whether I will ply it up at a different time during the week or whether I'll just go ahead and ply it right away tonight. Conventional wisdom is you rest your singles for a while. I am not much for conventional wisdom. However, I do find that if I rest my singles overnight, they are not quite as energized as when I just try and apply them right after I have spun them. And so I find that it leads to less kind of tangles and little corkscrews and blips when I start plying. So I may wait just because that will make my life a little bit easier. So this is what it looks like. As you remember, it was basically, apparently I was spinning away at midnight and not worrying about, I have a sliding hook flyer. So this is the result of that because I did not slide the hook. Usually you would slide the hook to kind of evenly coat the bobbin. Apparently that's not on my register. And I don't think it's on my register with the second bobbin either. But this is what I have. The braid itself was a whole bunch of blues, a little bit of indigo. To me, this reminds me a lot of denim. I mean, it's not denim fabric, it is wool, but it reminds me a lot of the colors of denim, and I think it's just going to be a fun braid. I don't know if I've spun it thin enough to make it kind of sock yarn. Even if I did spin it thinly, it would probably be like a sport weight sock yarn. And I have no idea on the yardage that I'm going to get. I'm just going to have to wait and see. But I am excited about that, and that will be plied and washed and skeined and probably in the shop later this week. And I will bring it next week to show you. But that is my first not finished skein yet, but it is my first skein for the shop in a while, and I am excited about that. So I went ahead and picked up another braid. Depending on how my week works, I don't know how far I'll get into it before I talk to you again on Sunday. So the interesting thing is that my big spinning days are Wednesday and Sunday because those are the days that I should say. So my schedule has changed a lot over the last few years, partially because of work and partially because of the pandemic. I moved a lot of my spinning wheels into my office, and I do a lot of spinning when I'm on meetings, because I can put my electric wheel under my, actually I can put both wheels under my desk, and then I can actually spin. So I can spin while I'm on meetings, although I don't do that often, because spinning requires me to actually look down quite a bit more at my fiber. I don't do it quite by feel the way I do a lot of my knitting. But the other thing it allows me to do is it allows me to spin during knit night. And because we have not returned to in-person knit nights, we have seen each other in person a few times. I am part of a group that we started sort of organized around a store ages and ages and ages ago. The store has been closed for at least 13 years now, and we used to go to their Wednesday night knit night. And when the store closed, a bunch of us decided that we did not want to stop meeting, and so we started meeting on Wednesday evenings, and we picked restaurants, and we all kind of either lived or worked around one central part of Kansas City. And there are lots of restaurants, there's a shopping district there's a bunch of things. And so we basically started meeting weekly on Wednesday evenings and knitting for several hours together. And it was kind of a drop-in, drop-out thing. If you couldn't go one week, that was fine. I went almost every week. And so consequently, I have been sort of meeting and knitting with the same group of women honestly, for the past 15 years, which is pretty freaking amazing when you think about it. We've been through a ton together, very, very knitting circle-ish. We've gone through a lot of hard life things and a lot of great life things. And when the pandemic started and we could not meet face-to-face, we decided to take our meetings to Zoom, which is obviously the way a lot of things went. And actually, we started by just doing Wednesday nights on Zoom, but then because we had always kept to kind of one knitting night per week because all of us had families and things that we wanted to do. And oftentimes on weekends, after we had spent a really hard work week, we would spend time with our husbands and, our spouses and children and activities and whatnot. Well, in the pandemic, that all stopped. And many of us were working from home every day alongside our spouses and alongside our children. And so we started just meeting once a week, but ultimately we decided to add a second meeting per week. And so for the last 2.5 to 3 years now, we have been meeting on Wednesdays and Sundays. And while there is no substitute for meeting in person, like I said, we met a few times in person over the summers when it's warm enough for us to be outside. We honestly, there are benefits and drawbacks. There's no substitute for meeting in person, especially when you want to see and look at someone else's project and feel it and see what the actual colors are, because Zoom does not account for that at all. But there are also some benefits to Zoom, which is you can come in your pajamas because you are in your own house, and so it does not matter. You can stay up until you're mostly ready to go to bed because you don't have to drive home afterwards. You just walk next door and hop into bed. So we have kept that going, and we meet for several hours on Wednesday evenings and on Sunday evenings. And as part of that, I have been able to add spinning into my knit night because I am sitting in one stationary spot. I'm not in a restaurant somewhere. And generally I join the call about 6 or 6:30, and generally we finish about 10. And so I manage to spin for an hour or two and then knit for an hour or two. So I should say that my spinning, a lot of it takes place on Wednesdays and Sundays, which is also why podcasting on Mondays was really cool, because I get a couple sessions of spinning in, and I'm just not sure how that's going to work towards finishing skeins now. That was a really long explanation and probably not something you're very interested in. Chromatic aberration in blues. And the next braid that I decided to pull out was one from the October Hello Yarn Club. It is purples and oranges, and there is a very little bit of, you can see like right there, there's a very little bit of kind of a swampy green in there, and I love that color. And this is called Double Double Toil and Trouble because it was October's colorway, and it is on Falkland, and I will be starting this one hopefully this week, and this will also be destined for the shop as well. So I think that brings me to the end. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I know I got a little wordy and explained a whole bunch of things, but I hope that I almost forgot to tell you my most exciting news for the week. And this happened yesterday. Yesterday, my sister messaged me and said, can Roxy and I call you for a few minutes? And I was like, sure. Roxy is my niece, for those of you who haven't heard before. She is 9. And they called, and it turned out that Roxy had asked my sister yesterday morning if she could teach her how to knit. And she said she really wanted to learn, and she hoped that maybe my sister could teach her. Now, my sister knows how to knit. She mostly just knows the basics. We both learned from my grandmother when we were small, and she doesn't particularly care for it. My sister and I kind of divided along the needlework versus like the drawing and painting side, and my sister loves drawing and painting and the visual arts. And that, well, I guess they're all visual arts, but more of the fine art as opposed, well, not even fine art, more of the drawing and painting side of things as opposed to the needlework side of things. My grandmother did both. Actually, she did a little bit of everything. She was a weaver. She did spin, although we did not discuss it when I was a kid because I didn't even know about that. But so she did learn how to knit, and so she knows the basic knit and purl. And so she was trying to help Roxy learn, but the other thing that she was trying to do was she was trying to teach by YouTube video, because Beth and I are both left-handed, and we knit sort of... We don't knit truly left-handed because we watched my grandmother knit right-handed, and so we mirrored some things that she was doing, and we didn't mirror other things. So there are parts of our knitting that we do things right-handed and parts of our knitting that we do things left-handed, but Roxy is right-handed. So my sister wanted Roxy to learn the, and I'm going to say the proper way to knit. There is no like full 100% proper way to knit. Basically, if you are creating knit fabric, you are knitting appropriately. But my sister wanted to teach her in a way that was going to be as easy as possible for her, which is sort of the dominant way that right-handed knitters knit. So she went through a bunch of YouTube videos, and so they called, and they were having a few problems, and so I gave them a few tips. One of the things that they were doing was they started with a backwards loop cast on. And for any of you who've been knitting for some time, or if you are starting to knit, I don't think the backwards knit cast on is actually a super great way to start. It is a super easy cast on, super easy to do, but sometimes you get like extra long lengths of yarn between your stitches because the tension just isn't as nicely kept as a few other cast-ons. And Roxy was having a really, really hard time with that first row. And as a lot of you know, when you cast on for the first row, a lot of times those stitches are tight or they're just a little bit awkward. So one of the recommendations that I made, and I'll give this to you in case you're ever teaching someone, is to go ahead and do the cast-on and knit the first row for them. When they are first learning the knit and purl stitches, it is enough to remember without learning the whole cast on and then having to learn the knit and purl stitches. So for the first time or two that you start teaching them knit and purl, go ahead and cast on and knit that first row for them and just set it up for them, because I think it sets them up for a lot easier success, and it also gives them a little bit of a sample on the needle that shows them what the stitches should look like. So that's my first tip. My second tip is maybe don't use backwards loop cast on. To be honest, what I told my sister to do yesterday is my sister knows the long tail cast on, that's her primary cast on, and I said just do the long tail cast on and knit the first row and let Roxy start knitting on those so that it'll be easier for her. And by the time, by 10 o'clock last night, my sister sent me a photo, and Roxy had about an inch of beautiful little garter ridges, and her tension is really good. My sister said the only thing that she has a little trouble with is sometimes she wraps the needle twice, which would result kind of in a double yarn over, and so then she has extra stitches on the needle. But it looked really good, and I'm so excited, and I really wish I lived there, because I really want to help them out. The other thing that I thought about upon reflection last night, and I'm gonna text my sister back, is that I really think actually a good cast on, and this is not how I learned at all. I actually learned the backwards or the E-loop cast on. One of the things that I was going to suggest is that she teach Roxy the knitted cast on, because it is a little bit like knitted stitches, and I think that will make a little bit more sense. The long tail, you kind of still have to navigate the over under thing, and I just want to make this as easy as possible so that Roxy can kind of feel confident in her skills, and so I think I'm going to recommend that, but I'm super excited. The other thing was that I suggested they start with something small rather than, I started with kind of the standard scarf, which is a big wide swath of fabric that does not change in stitch counts. Obviously that is super useful as a teaching tool, but for a lot of particularly young kids, that's a really long project if you're kind of painstakingly doing one row at a time. So I suggested a doll blanket, so that she could do just kind of a little square. I could suggest a washcloth, although I would not necessarily recommend that they work with cotton as one of their first fabrics. I would really like her to work with something a little more elastic, you know, like wool, or to be honest. I think she's probably using acrylic, which is fine, but I didn't want her to work with something like cotton that has no give, because I feel like that would also be frustrating, particularly if you are adjusting the tension of your stitches. So I suggested a doll blanket. I think the next project that I would suggest would be either a scarf or a hat. And if she's up for a little bit more of a challenge, I might suggest either knitting in the round or 2 squares and sewing them together to make a little bag, mostly because I know that Roxy likes playing Dungeons and Dragons and she has lots of dice, and so I think a really fun little project for her that she could complete within a fairly short amount of time would be like a little dice bag. And really you could either you know, start it and knit in the round and then just sew the bottom closed if she wanted to learn how to knit in the round, or she could just knit 2 squares and sew them together, and that would be a good, useful, you know, and then she could even do like a little drawstring for it, or learn a couple eyelets to then put a ribbon through it. So those are going to be my suggestions for her next. As you can see, my brain is whirring a million miles a minute. Okay, I really am going to stop now because I'm at 40 minutes, and that is a long podcast for me, but that was actually my high point of the week, was getting to chat with her yesterday about knitting. And not that I did anything yesterday, because my sister and Roxy muddled their way through it pretty much all by themselves, but I was also this much proud of myself that I gave them some tips that made it much easier for her, and then by the end of the day she had some knitting to show for it, so that was really exciting. So I hope that you have a wonderful week ahead. I hope that you're staying healthy and working on fun projects, and I will say, as I always do, happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye!